Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we shouldn't by any means have any internet trouble. If you could see behind the scenes here, I actually am in a cabin nearby where I live, and I'm using the same internet that I normally do, but it seems to be working fine over in this location. It's a long story. I don't need to get into it. There is a name for people that have a Luddite. I think that's what I might be. Technical problems now and then. But I hope you are able to check out our blog this week. Charles Lear always does a great job in various topics. And this week is the government-funded UFO study in France. So check that out. He also makes an audio blog for the podcast stream, as well as I put that up on YouTube each week. So and he does this all this hard work as a labor of love. He'll be coming out with a book in a while. I'll be out actually in New Mexico in September with a friend. We're going to go out there and actually sit with Dave Marler, Charles Lear, and some icons in the UFO world that are going to be joining us there. Then that's something to look forward to. Tonight's guest is we have Paul Kirsch on, and he has a book. It's called Blueprint for Interstellar Travel. He's going to be talking a lot about that. It was inspired actually in the beginning actually by a UFO. We're going to talk about that too. It's all very interesting. And so he's joining us from the West Coast. He'll be on in just a minute. And I do want to thank everyone that helps out with the show. And anyone can do that over at patreon.com. That link's up on our website. And we thank every single listener to the show. It's really grown quite a bit. It's coming up on the 10th year anniversary. I think it's 464 shows. This one might be. But anyway, it's been enjoyable all along. I never get tired of it. And I really like exploring ideas. And that's one of the reasons I have this guest on. We have a lot of exceptional guests lined up as well ahead. So what we're going to have the next couple of months are already booked. Some really great guests. Anyway, we are ready to bring in the guest tonight. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, thank you, Martin.
And so, Paul, I got to ask you, what can you give the? I know you're not on. I haven't seen you on other podcasts, and that's another thing. I like to have fresh voices, talk about this subject and other subjects like what you're going to be discussing tonight. But what inspired you to do all this work? Because I know you came out with a book. I think it was something like 10 years ago. And you learned from some of the stumblings in that book, yet you got yourself back up again and you put out another book. And you're the biggest part of the reason, from what I gather by reading as much as I did, the reason you are doing these books is to share information. You're not doing any promotionals or anything. You just want to share this information so it can get out there. And maybe someone... you gave me an analogy. Maybe someone can, there it is, can do something as this as a foundation and move forward possibly. So if you would, tell us about yourself and what made you decide to do this.
Right. So I was actually an administrator at UCLA and in the early days of the internet. And I was searching around. I was kind of bored one day and I typed in a keyword, interstellar travel. And on the top of the list, and we were probably using a Netscape in those days, was a company, and the company's name was Unitel, and it said something like, we make interstellar travel possible or something. So this really intrigued me. And there was an email address for a fellow, Larry Maurer, and he was the CEO of the company. And on a lark, I sent him an email. And I really didn't think I'd get a reply from the CEO of a company. But, very shortly after, he did reply in an email. And that was the origin of a perhaps 15-year email interchange I had with Larry. Every day we would email, and he would often write quite lengthy emails, over 300 words. And he was told me about kind of this whole story and what led to this team of a fellow named Michael Miller and a fellow Larry Marr to develop a company, to get incorporated, to get patents both in the U.S. and Japan, and to try to build an interstellar spaceship. To me, this was incredible. I mean, it was, even to the present, who else is working on, an actual vehicle to do something like this? So, it was amazing. And then is the process of like, why isn't this being communicated? And if it isn't communicated, then I felt an urgency and a drive to promote it myself.
And so what was the process? Did you use, there was this Miller and Maurer, right?
Yes. So, Mr. Maurer has since deceased, tragically, and he was sort of an engineer fellow and a CAD designer. He said that he had done CAD drawings for lumber mills. Both of these fellows live in Oregon, so that it was the wood industry, lumber industry, and so Mr. Maurer was a CAD designer, and then Mr. Miller was a contract electrician, and Mr. Miller is a person of an extraordinary intelligence, an extraordinary speed of intelligence, and has a great depth of knowledge in physics and a number of fields. So, I wanted to hear their story, and in fact, their story is that they had witnessed a UFO at close range, perhaps 15 feet away. It hovered in front of them, and then it was from that and apparently some downloads that Mr. Miller developed this invention. So it's really an extraordinary story. I mean, this is the thing. I feel like there are small communities where amazing things are happening. I mean, you probably know people like this yourself. Small communities where incredible things are happening, and it's very hard to break through into mainstream science, mainstream media, when you're trying to juggle a bunch of other things, pay the rent, advance your designs, etc.
Now, can you get into detail about what they have told you about their UFO sighting and the whole download thing? That's really fascinating.
Yeah, I can't go into great detail because the sort of information as it is last stood is somewhat proprietary, in that they may want to develop a story themselves. But in brief, I guess I can say in roundabout terms, Michael had some flash to call his friends early one morning and to go out to, I believe it's Mount Washington, and they drove out, and then he, I believe he thought of a certain place of going, and then shortly thereafter they saw this this probe. Now, I have a model of this is a 3D printed model, you can see, and it looks something like this. And you notice it's a very different shape. It's not like your typical rocket, of course. So again, both of these individuals, Mr. Moore and Mr. Miller, are extraordinary people who were fighting extraordinary odds, and I wanted to help them.
And how were they received by themselves before you helped them? I mean, did they actually go into where they thought they were getting this information from, or anything like that?
Well, it depended. It would depend on what audience they were speaking to. There is sort of like the insiders and the outsiders. They did speak with some government officials. In fact, I don't have all the details of that. Mr. Moore did write a book called Laser Propulsion. It may still be available. Mr. Moore also wrote another book called Debris. But you know, you know, I feel very strongly in the whole UFO hypothesis or UAP hypothesis. And so that was sort of quickly established between us. And so he was willing to share it. I don't believe he shared that with everyone.
Yeah, yeah. So what are your, I guess I'll ask you in the beginning, are your thoughts in part of the reason that you've got involved in this is, are you thinking that some of the propulsion that people may be seeing as a UFO has a possibility in some of these theories?
Well, yes. I mean, you know, I think there's a consensus among a lot of people that the concept of Newtonian-based physics of a back exhaust system of rocket is ultimately, you know, 13th century physics, we say. And you know, with the initial invention of like gunpowder, when they stuff gunpowder in a piece of bamboo and use it as fire rockets to attack their enemies. So that was, you know, this is really ancient technology, but you know, certainly in the early 20th century, the quantum physicists showed that there's Newtonian science and something else, and you get into you know, all the greats of the quantum world of Einstein, Schrodinger, Heisenberg, et cetera, and Born. And so many people and from many angles are working on, you know, new systems that are different than simply, you know, shooting kerosene out the back of a canister.
Yeah, I think you had a term for it. I forget, reactionary or whatever you called it. You know, the type
back
of
reaction. Yeah, back reaction. Yeah,
back reaction.
the Bosco system, and yeah. Right.
And so, what is the? I guess if you want to attack any part of these theories, you know, I know one thing. You know, when it comes to quantum physics, there's so many unexplainable things. It's kind of like, you know, between what's a wave and are we all, you know, the particles, are we all just energy that somehow sticks together? Or, you know, it's really bizarre, spooky stuff when it comes to all the quantum physics.
Yeah, it is not a trivial field. It is, you know, I struggle to understand stuff. I look up stuff on Wikipedia. I've often spoken to people who know quite a lot more than myself. And so, yeah, you know, there's a lot to learn for all of us. And, but it's fascinating, you know, like you just mentioned, how, you know, is it a particle, is it a wave, you know, what, you know, the mystery of action at a distance, you know, and entanglement. So it's curious, and it's where things are headed. So yeah, we all, you know, it's an interesting field. Let me say that, and let me just add that, you know, a couple caveats. I meant to mention this at the beginning. So I'm a teacher. That's my bread and butter job, and then I'm a writer, and I've written a few books, and I have some more books in line to publish. And I'm not a trained academic physicist, and also that the ideas that I express are solely from Mr. Miller and Mr. Marr, and I'm just a scribe that, you know, I have some art skills, some graphic skills. It's a painting I'm working on in the background. And
Pretty nice.
Thank you. And so, you know, those are where my skills lie. And I feel I'm an open-minded person.
Yeah, open-mindedness is something where that's how people can seem to move forward, you know, with about any part of science. They have to have an open mind to try things, failure, all that, and learn from the failures and accept defeat when needed. What is what does the term quantum tunneling mean? I've heard that term before.
Right. Well, that was a term created a while ago, and the idea was that you had a particle in one place, and then it would go to another place, although it didn't have enough energy to do so. It was, this is the thing where they described it as like a hill, that the particle didn't have the energy to kind of go over the hill, or have enough energy to switch from one orbital to another in atomic in quantum terms maybe, and yet it did so. So, and then they found there was a probability that it did so. I mean, it wouldn't always work, and but some of the time there was a probability that it could go over this from one side of the hill to another, or from one place to another, without having the energy to do so. The tricky thing, and for which I get scolded when I talk to trained scientists, is this very precise use of language. And so the term tunnel is just one way to describe something, but there's no like sort of actual tunnel. It's just sort of a way of visualizing something, like that.
Yeah. So why don't you kind of like explain the thoughts on your book, the Blue Book, a blueprint for interstellar travel. Kind of, I brought in some of your illustrations. I don't know if there's any you want to cue me on, and I'll pop them up as we go along, if you'd like to. And for this can get a little tech heavy. So, but I have your book, and I do appreciate the way you laid it out. So just about anybody, or I can easily understand what you're trying to say. And that's probably not all that easy to explain these strange things in that way.
Well, thank you. Yes, I think the first thing is to say that that the process is not a back exhaust system. It's not a rocket that's pushed forward, and that goes along with more modern propulsion systems that use ions, and other systems that still have this sort of back exhaust propulsion system, or a solar sail system that's sort of where photons are pushing a panel, and the object is moving that way. So this is entirely different. This is very much based on quantum properties, and so that's the first thing. It's just important to say that this is also not an Alcubierre drive. The people who have an interest in this field are probably familiar with Alcubierre, and there are many ideas being worked on at this time, and ours is just one of them. I want to say also, before I begin, I'm sorry for the long introduction, but during the process of creating my book, again, I'll show you what it looks like here. And here we go. And so I got about 3 PhD, academically trained scientists, and I had about 2 people with the mechanical and electrical engineering look at the book. Maybe it's about 3 people, like with master's degrees, and they gave me various critiques, and some were mildly supportive, some were questioning it at that time, and one fellow who did have a PhD in plasma physics said this could work. So that was a great boost to me, and unfortunately, I've signed an agreement with that fellow that I'm not allowed to mention his name. So, this is another constraint of, that kind of a thing. But in any case, I did thereafter publish the book, and I sent it to the chair of a physics department an interesting fellow because I later found he was associated with TTSA. So he said, no, that this as it stands would not work. So after that, I decided to kind of pull back from further promoting the book. And because, I didn't want to muddy the waters of ufology, it used to be ufology, now it's ufology. And so I didn't want to make things any worse for the field in respect to the field. I've since come back from that opinion, and I'll explain that. But I wanted to give you that a little bit of intro that, as it stands, this book will not help you build a interstellar spaceship in your backyard. It is a foundation, and I'll talk about that shortly. So sorry for the long intro.
No, we've got hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you a picture that looks like this. Do you have this picture here?
Yes, I will bring that up. Let's see. Show that one more time, if you would.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I have this right here.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we say that our probe, and again, it has this, a teardrop shape. I don't know if they can see that, but with a lens divided into three parts. And the probe is aligned at actually we're not ready for that picture yet. If you could.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, you can go on to the next image. Actually, you had the right. So the probe is aligned so that it's facing this planet, and photons, little particles of light, are going to hit the front of the probe, which we call the lens. And so once they hit that lens, an individual photon is isolated. So now that is existing technology. In fact, I spoke with a Harvard lab who told me how they isolate individual photons. So that is existing technology. Anyway, once a single photon is isolated, so you see there's that group there, and then we're going to just isolate one of them. And then what happens next is we put that charge of that photon on the skin, on the surface of the probe. Now, if you can go to the next one, yeah, I think that picture worked. So you see that there's minus signs. Those are supposed to be minus signs on the skin of the probe, and then you see plus signs on what will be an extended beam, a laser beam, three kind of lasers shooting forward. Again, a minus on the ship and a plus in a extended, what we say, a laser extension with a positively charged positron endpoint. There's some technical terms here, but I think you get a sense of that. You might go on to the next picture. Yeah. So what is really going on? In that last picture, you saw how that there were laser beams, and they were turning both individually and as an ensemble. So you see individually, there's a green light laser, a red light laser, and a blue light laser. Two of them are going one way, one is going the other way, and the whole ensemble is turning. So now you can go back to that second picture again.
You talking about this one?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
No, yeah, that one there. So you see how, it's coming out of the probe. They're turning and they're spinning like that. And what we say is that there's a lot going on here. There's a focus, because it's a lens, it's able to kind of focus the energy. And also because of the properties of the lens, we can create these lasers that come to a point. I'm going to go on now. I didn't give you these photos, but I'm going to briefly show them to you. So there's something inside the probe that enables the lens to vibrate, and that creates those lasers. And then let's see. So as the lasers are produced, they also there's as the lens vibrates, it creates something called phonons. You may have the old record player, when the thing vibrates, you're creating phonons. And then we're going to go on a little bit. So this this point, there's a positively charged point at the other end of this these three laser beams that are focused on this point. So we say that, or I should more correctly say that Mr. Miller says that this creates what's called a Dirac string. So kind of on one side, you have something called an electron, and on the other side, you have something called a positron. And this forms what Mr. Miller calls a dion. And so we're beginning to, if you want to use the term tunnel, we're sort of creating a bridge in space there. Now, the interesting thing here, I'm going to show you something here. I got to find the right picture. But we say that that you have an original photon that came out of that probe. If you could go to that first shot, or your first or second slide there. Actually, the second slide. Yeah, so you see that those photons are hidden at that probe like that. And so, let me see, I'm looking for something here. In any case, those photons in Mr. Miller's understanding, if I have this correct, are made up of an electron and positron. So what we're doing is we're swapping our probe with a probe in, here's the picture I was looking for, with the electron of a distant photon. Here's an example. I'm speaking, it's maybe getting confusing, so I want to clarify something here. So I don't know if you can see that. Imagine that there's two couples on a dance floor, and they're dancing together. Then the lights go dark, and while the lights go dark, the couples switch partners. So essentially, it's a way way to describe this process here. So you have an electron and a positron from the distant source. You're creating an artificial electron and positron with our probe and endpoint, and then you're swapping partners. And then this probe is at the remote place, many light years away. That's
in a way, is it similar to like quantum entanglement?
Well,
I mean, it's like a reactionary thing you're talking about, it seems like.
Well, it's more of a, maybe you could say, access to interdimensional space. I think it might be more accurate to say. And that like Mr. Miller has told me that space doesn't exist, and again, these are, kind of abstract concepts to understand, but, we normally think of like, wow, like, we walk down the street, we get on a bus, it takes us a half hour to get into town. And in that understanding of space, it takes us time to get from one place to the other. But let's say in a dream or something, you're in one place and then suddenly you're at another place. And so, we don't really understand dreams, but, that would be an analogy. It's accessing a different dimension to achieve transport.
So is that what this is? Is this basically like an interdimensional hypothesis for travel?
I'd cautiously say yes, and cautiously because I'm not a trained scientist, and nor can I convey the intelligence and logic of Mr. Miller entirely.
And as far as you know, you mentioned that other people are looking at similar things. Would you say this is like on the table somewhere, or some parts of it on the table somewhere, where say in Skunk Works or something like that, someone is maybe trying to develop something?
There's a group called APEC, APEC, and they have weekly meetings, and there's some pretty extraordinary stuff going on with them. And I know a number of inventors. I'm an inventor myself. There's a lot going on, on the civilian side, certainly on the government side. There's a lot going on. And of course, it's debatable what these recent UAP reports represent.
Yep. And while you just mentioned it, so what do you think about the recent report? What's your opinion? Have you looked into it?
Right. So, I'm laughing because there's so much tension in this thing. There was such a big buildup. 180 days. What's going to happen? Are they going to spill the beans we've been waiting for 30 years? And so for all of us in the UAP community, it was a great disappointment. I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but I think for a majority of people, it was a great disappointment. And yet, if you scratch the surface, you saw that out of the 144 sightings, only one could be explained as a balloon.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I'm a passionate person and an advocate for UAP disclosure. I write letters to Congress, and I encourage other people to do so. And I have some other activism ideas as well.
When you and I were talking shortly off air, I was hoping to be able to pull up Lawrence Krauss, an amazing theoretical physicist from Canada, had his take on the report, and it was all kind of poo-pooing the UFO community and how ridiculous we were. I wish I could pull that up. I'll try to pull it up at some point. Maybe I'll put it in the show notes. But along those lines, he brings up Mick West, who seems to be the go-to debunker for all of these people. But, Mick West is not a scientist. Mick West is a gamer, someone who creates, games. But he has done some really good work. But he's done a lot of, senseless debunking. And it's... I think he's kind of a pain in the neck to a lot of us in this field that really want the answers. And I saw him write a comment the other day that something along the lines where, everyone always says that he's calling everything birds, and it's kind of true. He's I understand, debunking. There is definitely a place for that. There's definitely a place for skepticism, especially when it comes to all this. But I also think that people can go too far and be closed-minded and, like they should know. If anyone else knows, then they should know, type of thing.
Yeah. I want to address these very points, the points that you're bringing up very directly, because I'm quite familiar with them and I understand them after years of experiencing them. So here I wrote down, what are the 5 social taboos in ufology? One is don't do anything that might harm your reputation. So in the academic science world, the scientists are reluctant to do anything that might harm their reputation that they worked hard to keep polished. Another thing is don't speak in public about paranormal experiences you have had where other people can overhear you. Some people will be scared. Some people will be dismissive. You find that you have to tread carefully about what you can share with others. Another thing is don't try to break the ice with a colleague who you sense are clueless and uninformed. So this is a reality that many people are clueless and uninformed, and it can feel like a provocation to your own understanding. And so when you try to break the ice with them, they clam up and turn away. This is a reality, what happens. And then you may have family or significant others who you think you can change them because you're close to them. That may not always be the case. And then again, you also have to consider their reality and the difference in ontologies, perspectives on reality. And lastly, don't expect the media to be interested. I actually contacted the New York Times about another matter yesterday, and I spoke to a fellow and I said, why isn't there more coverage of this? And he said, oh, well, we do cover it. We actually had a little podcast about the report. And I said, well, why wasn't it on the front of the front page? And he says, well, he didn't really answer that one. And so I said, they do cover it. And I said, there isn't that much coverage. And then he said, well, we may not cover it as much as you'd like to, but we cover this. That there are many other pressing issues, and we don't always cover this. And then I said, well, listen, this is something that could transform all of civilization. And you have remarks by Mr. Brenner, the former head of the CIA, and you have certainly Harry Reid, and now Obama, Hillary Clinton. A lot of course, Lou and I forget his name, the other fellow.
Chris Mellon.
Yeah, right. I just skip my mind for the moment. But these people are really sticking their necks out, and they're saying extraordinary things, and the disconnect is powerful. And I welcome every opportunity myself and for others to pinpoint this disconnect. You have top people saying, that there's some reality to the UAP hypothesis, and other people who are dismissive. So, certainly this should be something that should be addressed in the media, and it's not.
Yes, I listened to that podcast you're mentioning on the New York Times did called The Daily on the UAP report, and it was sort of snarky a little bit.
It was.
Yeah, and also there were. I mentioned last week that there were two podcasts that I listened to on the way down to the Berkshires when I was there, and that was one of them. And both podcasts said the same thing about Roswell, that it was definitive that it was the Mogul balloon, the Russian spy balloon.
Clearly, these people have not studied the field.
That's right. That was just one of the, dare I say, one of the lies that the government told. One of the 5 lies that they talked about when it comes to Roswell. One of the 5 cover-ups, basically.
So that we are only left with the struggle to raise consciousness, politely, respectfully, with kindness and patience, but persistently. Yeah.
Anyway, no, thanks for your input on that. I'm glad we're kind of on the same page when it comes to that. It's a major story. You're right. My friend I was talking to the other day said, she said along the lines, well, she's out there talking to people that normally don't have an interest in UFOs, but asking them, hey, have you seen on the news, about this UAP report and, the task force looking into and all that? And they said, no, it's not really, for something as extraordinary as it really is, it's really not getting the coverage.
Right. It's a binary thing. You're on or you're off, and there's very little gradation there.
Yeah.
And this is the struggle that those interested in this field face. Um, that it's a strange thing. I want to follow up on these things. What you will find is that there's dismissal and non-validation. There's a lack of interest by friends, families, coworkers, supervisors of what you personally experience with great intensity. There's a lack of comprehension and full support by those whom one knows. There's a lack of academic feedback from academically trained people. There's no commonality of terms. It's difficult in determining the right specialty. There's low interest in the UAPs. In fact, I knew a professor, and he a number of years ago, I brought it up, and he was quite dismissive of it when I brought it up to him. There's often a rudeness in media venues that you thought would be sympathetic. I've tried to reach different alternative medias media venues. I wasn't able to get through. And yet, the curiously, the right-wing media, the Fox News and such, have picked this up. And then there's the economic frustration that you don't have resources to develop and convey your ideas in a powerful way. This is another critical issue. So I just want to validate those experiences for others like myself who are in this position.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Hey, there's been someone asked, a couple of people have asked in the chat if you are familiar with who Dr. Eric Davis is.
Yes, in fact, I met him. I don't know him personally, but I did meet him. And very bright guy. In fact, I said, I have kind of or my friends have a theory for interstellar travel, and we'd like to develop the math to defend it. And I said, what do you suggest? He said, learn it. So, he said it gently and respectfully, but, I'm far from being able to develop all the math. But Davis is, a very interesting character. He's said some things in the New York Times article that were, interesting and provocative, and he sort of goes to the edge and comes back. I respect the man. He's another extraordinary man in this extraordinary time.
Yeah, I like what you just said. He goes to the edge and comes back. So getting back to, you mentioned there's some, actually there's a couple of questions in chat I'm going to pull up in just a minute, but going back to what you said earlier, the downloads, I mean, this is something that I've heard talk about. It seems kind of more recently, but I've heard people say that, all of a sudden they have this idea that springs up and, right after a UFO event, which I think is fascinating. Is that something besides the story that those two gentlemen told you, Miller and Maurer, did you ever look into if other people have claimed that as well?
Well, yes. And in fact, I was reading some interesting things yesterday on Reddit. And often these downloads are kind of vague, altruistic gestures of like, heal the earth, and we all know that, and so I myself might have had some experience something like that years ago, and maybe also similarly I had a sense of like a desire to help others after that experience, but who knows? But what we could say is that the other, the other, whatever it may be, and various people use this term, the other, interacts at the level of consciousness, and I want to, I want to talk about that a little bit. So first, let me kind of try to answer your question. So, what do I think of these download things? I think, some are rather vague, ambiguous generalizations, and some seem to be quite specific. And what intrigued me about Mr. Miller is that he seemed to have gotten very specific knowledge to enable him to get a patent.
Really, that's pretty amazing. And when it comes to, sometimes when you look back in history, you wonder how certain people like Tesla and someone like that could have all these amazing theories. There's the alternating current. Supposedly he scratched out on a sand with a stick, while it just came to him like that. And it's almost like, how do these people get these ideas and their genius? I'm not saying it comes from aliens, but it sure is pretty curious how some people just have this amazing gift, I guess.
Right. Like, we all know the mathematician Ramanujan, it came up with extraordinary mathematics, ideas that sent him from a village in India to the, centers of mathematics in England at the time. And Einstein described the way, I believe Einstein said that he came up with his theory of relativity. He said he experienced it viscerally. He had a visceral sensation. His muscles, something sort of blew through his muscles, and he came up with these ideas. So, yeah, in the next 20 years, we may have a better handle on what all this is all about.
Yeah. It seems like the more we learn, the less we know about reality.
I feel that very strongly. I realize I know very little.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes back to, what you talked early on about, particles, whether it's a wave or mass. And that also, I'd like to, at some point we can touch on that, because mass is always seems to be the issue in high speed travel. So here's a question that I'm just not familiar with this. What are your thoughts on Project Green Glow? Do you happen to know what that is?
I sure do, and it's an excellent question. There is an excellent BBC documentary on Project Green Glow. It's not readily available, but I have seen it. Here's the thing, there's a fellow who was working on an idea for gravity or gravity control. He was dismissed. He struggled with it for many years. And then at the end of this very provocative and mysterious documentary by the BBC, they say, and here's evidence that they can control gravity, without any details of like the technical aspect of it. So what's going on? That's I don't know. But Project Green Glow is interesting.
So what do you mean control gravity? That's pretty bizarre. I mean, that would definitely be an answer for so many things, energy, travel, it just seems like if you can control gravity, you can control about anything.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a quest for, centuries. I think I'm correct in saying that only recently have gravity waves been discovered, and it's just a very slow understanding of what gravity is, with the Higgs boson, and but it's rich for exploration. We don't know. I don't know. There are people who probably do know, but not me.
Yeah. You just mentioned the Higgs boson, and that's just another fascinating thing. And how far down do these things go? That type of thing is just another fascinating, another bizarre thing that we've discovered, within the last so many years. And, I think more and more will be coming along in that way. Just to let people know in the chat, if you want to ask a question, please put it in all caps. And at the last half hour of the show, we're going to be going into break in about 5 minutes here, but in the last half hour of the show, we'll be taking calls if you'd rather save your questions for them. But if you have a question as we're going along, please put it in caps, so I can, I'll catch it and see it and put it up if it's an appropriate time for it. So I'm glad that you actually have an interest in, the UFO topic. I think when I was talking to you back and forth in the beginning, figuring out if you'd make a great guest for the show, that topic came up. But have you mentioned something about a possible download situation, but have you actually yourself had any type of UFO unexplained sightings?
Well, yes, I have. I was riding on the 405 freeway in California near Carson, and I saw a gigantic circular shadow on the highway. And, as in a lot of California, the skies are clear blue.
Right.
I saw from a distance, I could see a circle on the highway. And then as I approached, I saw that it covered about 2 or 3 lanes. And I looked in the sky from distance and, as I drove toward it, and I saw nothing in the sky. So I don't know. I can't explain that. That was very strange. If something has a shadow, then there has to be something making the shadow. And as I passed under this shadow, there was a lot of static electricity. And kind of my hair stood on end. And another time I saw what appeared to be just sort of a little dash in the sky, and it was motionless. This was in the 1980s. And I pointed out to, I was in school at the time, and I pointed out to my peers, and none of them were interested. I mean, and I said, like, there's a white dash in the sky, it's not moving. Why isn't anybody interested, And so, and it was that remarkable thing of switch on, switch off. And then it was interesting that out of about 30 students, there was one other student, a woman, who was also curious about it herself. And she stood and watched this white object with me for a while. And it's interesting one might point out that she seemed to be a socially conscious and socially aware person. She was doing various social issue documentaries. And the other students that I was working with had more sort of commercial interests. And who knows? There may be a connection with a certain personality type.
Yeah. So did this thing ever move or anything?
No, it didn't. But I later saw there was some astronomer on the East Coast, I think in the mid-Atlantic states, who was a astronomer, and he had taken pictures of it, and it was the same thing I had seen. And some people had said, oh, that looks like some kind of Google blimp or something. But this was in the 1980s, before Google had become Google,
Yeah.
early 80s. And, so it was validating to see that someone else had seen the same thing I had seen. It looked the same. So, I don't know.
Wow. Well, we're just about ready to go into break here, but the thing about I just wanted to ask you real quickly is when you saw the shadow in the road, a lot of times I've mentioned on this show, and my thoughts are that there's only so much of the spectrum that we can see, and there's possibly things outside the spectrum that are right in front of us that we can't even notice, and I'm wondering if your thoughts were that this was something that was there, but you just couldn't see it.
Sure. Some kind of stealth, something, I don't know. But I visually didn't see anything, but I did see a shadow. And it was curious that it was right on the highway. So I would think a lot of other people would have seen it as well.
Right. Excellent. Well, it's time to go into break. And I just want to mention that during this break here, since I thought we were going to be talking about, interstellar travel, etc., I decided to play a clip that is with Alan Bean, who was the 4th person on the moon. This is just a 3.5-minute clip of him talking about what it was like. I recorded with Alan Bean several years ago about his artwork, actually. And here's the clip now. So if you're over there at KGRA Radio, we'll be right back right after these messages. What What was it like to stand on the moon and look up at Earth? I mean, is that just beyond words?
Well, I don't know if it's beyond words or not, but it is very science fiction when you're doing it. I mean, you're there and I was saying, this is the moon, that is the Earth. It was hard to believe it was true. Although I knew it was true, I was standing there looking at it, but still, it seemed so improbable and impossible up till, we actually did it 4 months before, back in 1969. Neil and Buzz were on the moon in July, and we went in November, Pete Conrad and I. And so it has a kind of a surreal quality to it from the point of view that these things were impossible ever since we were born, and we knew that when we were little kids, and we knew it as we grow up, and we knew it when we were young men, and finally we said, well, we're going to try to do this. We're going to do this. So it's kind of amazing to us, even. And I think that's one of the reasons there's not good descriptions of the feelings, is because they were so impossible to believe yourself, even though you're doing it. And so, as I say, I would be saying, this is the moon. I'd look down at my blueprint. This is the moon. And I'd look up and I'd say, that is the Earth. I'll tell you this, it's 239,000 miles away. That's a long, long way.
Yeah.
And you have to hope that the people put your rocket together correctly.
Jeez.
The little old ladies that sewed up your spacesuit, they did a good job. Your neck is way out when you go on a space mission. Things can go wrong. You just are saying, this is worth, to me, the risk, and I just hope nothing goes wrong that can't be fixed or that would be fatal. So you know that, but you don't think about it very much.
Yeah. The last question I have for you about the moon, has anyone ever confronted you about this silly moon conspiracy thing?
Oh, sure. People do it. They usually say things like, I've got an aunt that doesn't believe you went to the moon.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer in letting people be who they want to be. If they don't want to believe, go, it's okay, it doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
They don't believe it, well, I'm tell your aunt good luck, or tell your aunt that, hold on to that belief. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just not the way I see it, and not the way I remember it, but it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. I would never, ever try to convince her.
A clip from Alan Bean. That's an excerpt of a full interview I did with him about his beautiful artwork. As you saw up on the screen there, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, that is just incredible. His work was so realistic, and he's the only one that ever walked on the moon that is painting these pictures.
Wow.
What a nice attitude.
Here we go.
Talking to him.
3, 2, 1, go.
All right, welcome back. This is Martin Willis, and my guest tonight is Paul Kirsch, and we are discussing a lot of topics. Glad to say that we're talking as well about the UFO topic, and because they're one of the main things I always hear, physicists or astrophysicists or astronomers talk about when they're skeptical, which I believe, they have every right to be skeptical about, how UFOs get here, is the vastness of space. It's not even something that we can comprehend in any type of way. I've said this before. with an astrophysicist that was on this show at one point. Jeffrey Bennett said that he was working on a model, and the model was that the sun would be the size of a grapefruit in, I want to say he said Maryland, right around Washington, D.C. So it's sitting in Washington, D.C., the size of a grapefruit. The Earth next to that is the size of the ball and a ballpoint pen. Now you go all the way over to California, and that's the first star, the closest star to us. That's 4.5 light years away. So if you can kind of imagine the sun being the size of a grapefruit and us being the size, the little teeny tiny size of a ball and a ballpoint pen, and then all the way over to the West Coast to California. That's how far the distance is of the nearest star to us. So I understand why a physicist would say, it's impossible. It would take us 4.5 years at light speed to get to the nearest star. So, and as far as we know, there's no type of travel that will even reach near light speed. And then you have all the elements of the time variance and all that. So want to hear your thoughts on everything I just babbled. You were listening, right?
Of course, yes. So, well, I want to say that our the theory of transport that Mr. Miller proposes, and that I have struggled to understand over a number of years, and minimally have understood, requires us to take a very different perspective on space. And I have some specific information here. There's something called the Bourne and Jordan paper. It was published in the American Journal of Physics in 2009. And here's a quote. Heisenberg's bold idea was to retain the classical position coordinate with a quantum theoretical quantity. The new position quantity contains information about the measurable line spectrum of an atom rather than the observable orbit of the electron. So, with all it may sound like a lot of wordy gobbledygook, but to kind of get to the heart of it, part of what we're doing here is defining the place of something by the energy spectrum of something. And this will relate to navigation and transport. We get stuck in this perception of that these vast distances, that's one way to look at it. We're talking about a sort of phenomenological perspective here. And, there's another way to look at this. And so, like in that Bourne Jordan paper, to my understanding, he's pointing out that we're not specifically saying an object has a certain position. We're saying an object has a certain energy, and that defines the position. So, it's a different interpretation of how things work. And it's abandoning the rocket system. It's abandoning you have to, you get in a rocket, it takes time, takes 3 months to get to Mars. No, there is another way, and I want to bring up another thing here. I was telling Martin this earlier. There's a parable that came to mind, and that was that you can imagine a time, many centuries ago, perhaps in a certain mythic time, where one fellow created a wooden cart, and that cart had 4 sides to it and a platform floor, and then it also had 4 wheels, but those wheels were square. And so I say that all the pundits and professionals, the sages and savants, were critical of the fellow for proposing a cart. And they said, what do you mean you can transport, something with this? It's a box and it doesn't move. You push it and it's really hard to push. And then, maybe he had a friend or a sympathetic person or a wise person who said, well, what happens if we start to sand the edges of those wheels a little bit? And, he struggled to sand the square wheels a little bit, and gradually they became sort of more oval, and you pushed it, and hey, you could move that cart, and then so people had to see it, and people had to struggle against the consensus view about how things work. And this is the case. And indeed, like, how does science advance? I'll repeat it again. How does science advance without these stumbles and falls and short advancements? And so, although my book, again, it will not enable you to build an interstellar spaceship in your backyard, I believe it's a first step. And I would encourage people to check it out. The beginning of the book is available for free on Amazon. You can kind of start to read it and get to know a sense of where I stand about things, and also how the inventors, some of the struggles of the inventors. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. I spoke earlier about Lawrence Krauss and his article that came out in it was in Quillette.com, and the title of it is "Whatever It Is, It Ain't Aliens." And I think just the title alone already shows did anywhere in the preliminary assessment did it say this? It's not aliens, it's not extraterrestrial. He talks about the shiny flying objects, and it's just pushing it all off, like and calling people like myself a UFO enthusiast, heralded the report as it was the first official evidence of possible extraterrestrial intelligence, while the media forum around the world focused on the large number of official sightings remain unexplained. But anyway,
I have a great response to that fellow. And I have a friend, his name is Sam Millender, and he's an extraordinary guy. He's an inventor himself, and he's working on some extraordinary inventions that I hope we see in the near future. Anyway, he's also a musician. And so we were talking about this very thing about, closed-minded people. And he says, they're not musicians. He said, for a musician, think of the early jazz days. They'll switch from one chord to the other, and everybody in the classical musicians of the time would say, you can't go from a minor chord to a major chord, or whatever the musical way of expression is, And the jazz musician said, yes, you can, and here it is, And then so it's like his response was like, they're not musicians, and you have to show it to them before they believe it. And then the people around them, their peers, have to develop a consensus. And you are fighting and struggling against that established worldview. It happens again and again, and in a very predictable cycle. Though I will say, certainly the events of 2017, when the New York Times article first came out, and To the Stars, and and the bold statements by Lou Elizondo, it was quite heartening. Like, wow, we're all like going nuts.
Yeah.
But and we were also, suspicious, like, who's this intelligence guy, and what are these what's the intelligence process behind this? And we don't know. And we all, watch it as it advances. But certainly the ball has been kicked further down the field, and the door has cracked slightly open, and the Navy has made statements that they don't know what certain things are. I mean, it's a major step for the Navy.
Yeah.
So, it's things are changing. We hope they continue to change. We don't know. And since we don't know, I sort of take an existentialist approach, and that is, we may not get help from anybody else anywhere. We may not get any help. We have to take responsibility for our own lives and take responsibility for the situation, and do what we as individuals can do within our power.
Right. I hope the listener will let me vent just a little bit more on Lawrence Krauss's article, because I just want to read through as quickly as I can. There's kind of a lot to it, but his 5 arguments, maybe I'll get through all these, of why that extraterrestrials in no way can be here. Number 1, the laws of physics. Travel from another star in any reasonable time requires near light speed travel. A ship propelled by onboard conventional rocket fuel. See, he's saying that.
Let me stop you right there, because it's a wonderful statement by Mr. Miller about that. He says, forgive me for interrupting, I'll let you go.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
But he says, I said, Michael, that in existing theory, the closer you come to the speed of light, you gain infinite mass. So you could never go faster than the speed of light because you gain infinite mass. He says, Paul, yes, you're right. You can't go faster than the speed of light in this dimension. So, I mean, Michael's an incredible wit. And I could there are numerous things he said. They're just incredibly insightful. And so, okay, go on. What else is this?
Well, he discusses the mass right here, just a little further down. But even using nuclear fusion, one would use more than 2,000 times the mass of a ship in fuel for each acceleration and deacceleration to and from near light speed. Basic physics constraints imply that any onboard propulsion technology that could power a conventional ship-sized spacecraft to travel from one solar system to another at near light speed and decelerate within our solar system without would require using.
Let me interrupt.
All right, so I'm going to try to cut these down a little bit. This one I like. Number 2 is pretty funny. It only hurts when you stop.
I want to respond to that, what you just said, though.
Okay, sure.
It takes a lot of energy to travel from one place to the other and to decelerate, etc. And then here's another remark from Mr. Miller. Unless you use a portal.
Or the wormhole is, and we may talk a little bit about that, because I saw the laser-driven wormhole or something like that. I'll talk to you a little bit about that in a minute. Right. So number 2, it only hurts when you stop. Some reports claim that UAPs travel extremely fast and stop or turn instantly, no matter what the propulsion system G-forces experience in such a maneuver would be enough to crush steel, not to mention the unfortunate aliens inside. This is unless one had inertial dampers like they have in Star Trek, which alas are science fiction techno babble. In other words, he's just dismissing this whole thing of these, say, David Fravor or other people actually seeing on radar and other sensors, these things stopping and doing, up to 1,500 Gs in their maneuvers and things like that. And he's basically saying it's all hogwash.
Yeah, can I respond to that?
Yeah.
You forgive me to interrupt, because I know it's it makes for an interesting thing, right? The polarity of perspectives, and I know you don't feel like this, but you're saying how other people may think. So here's another thing. Let's talk about Fravor and Dietrich, and I think you can see on Dietrich's face in her 60 Minutes show, in the 60 Minutes show, that she's experiencing ontological shock. It's like, hey, this doesn't fit in the box, and yet I've seen it, And ontological shock is a wonderful term. John Mack, the Harvard professor, coined the term. And so this fellow, is going to experience some ontological shock. He hasn't yet. And in fact, you read about things like Sam Harris, who's a leading intellectual of the day, is saying, like, these guys are going to struggle in the future. I mean, there's going to be some problems here where they, hit that wall of ontological shock, and their whole, worldview is going to change. And that's something Lou is expressing. And he knows it. And I have a sense of what he knows. And, it's going to be a challenge for these people. Their whole lives and livelihoods are dependent on it. They're going to struggle. In the past, that might have been a jab from a weak jab against a giant. But even in that recent Twitter thing, I guess you might have followed this. Dietrich challenged Degrassi Tyson head on. I don't know. You saw that thing. It was amazing. She says, this is all social bias. She says, I teach social bias or something, and then, there was 3 points, and then she addressed all 3 of them, and she's got gravity. I mean, she's a fighter pilot, extraordinary person. I'm afraid to fly in a plane. She does combat missions, whatever. She has faced the ontological shock and is struggling to get to the other side. These other fellows have not, and they will. And if statements by Sam Harris and statements by a lot of other important people, are are shown, open up things, we're all going to see some big changes.
Yeah, I like everything you just said. I've been trying to get Alex Dietrich on this show. If anyone knows a way to reach her, she has a Twitter, but you can't message her on Twitter. And she was on with Mick West, and she kind of put him in his place a few times. So if anyone knows how to reach her, please let me know. I'd love to have her on this show. You're right. It was a new paradigm for her to swallow, to understand. And in the 60 Minutes program with her, she puts that across very well. I think she describes the feeling and how it kind of changed everything for her.
Oh, it's coming right from the heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to say kind of like a different approach. My approach is to, listen to the naysayers some, but not devote too much energy to them, but rather to devote energy to the forward-looking people, to the, next generation people who have extraordinary ideas. And I just know a number of people with extraordinary ideas. Rather to devote energies to that. Because I see a lot of fighting on Reddit and Twitter and attacks against Mick West, whatever. He is who he is. You can't convert someone with beliefs that deep.
Well, I've had him on the show 3 times, and so I'm open to listening to skeptics. And it's kind of, I think it was the sort of the irony in this is I had him on. And I had Kevin Day. I couldn't have Kevin Day from the USS Nimitz, who was in charge of all the radar on the Princeton. But during the Nimitz situation, basically, by the time I got finished with my talk with Kevin Day about what it could or could not be, Mick West actually came back on and said, "Yeah, I understand now why it couldn't have been, an F-18 Hornet or whatever it is he thought it might be." He said, "I understand now why." And it wasn't like a few weeks later, he was on some other program, again, saying the same thing, that it was an F-18.
Well,
not a tic-tac.
Yeah, you're doing something really important here, and that is that you're archiving the ontological perspectives and paradigms of the day. It is valuable what you are doing. You are giving a permanent record of the outlooks of this time period, and we will see how they will change. And people say that there was a before time and an after time, and
yeah.
So I
think we are.
I laud your willing to open-mindedness, perhaps, to get these skeptics on board and to record their statements. And, we will see, as so many other political events that have changed over time.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that anyone is better than anyone else or any thoughts are. It's just of what we can all learn together. I wouldn't like say, oh, hey, Nick West, guess what? You were wrong all along. And we in the UFO community were right. That's not going to help anyone. But just, it's something, hopefully we'll all be in agreement someday. You mentioned earlier Reddit and on social media. I kind of stay off all that stuff because there is a lot of infighting and there's a lot of jealousy and mudslinging. So I kind of stay off of all that, but I do hear, bits and pieces of what's going on out there. But it sounds like you get right into it and you read everything that's happening when it comes to this topic.
I sure do. And I have some other observations about this, sort of getting back to the consciousness thing. Just some notes I've taken. Encounters are defined by the awareness that one is dealing with something that has a terrifying speed of intelligence, and something that has an intelligence that, kind of speaks directly inside the mind. And that's kind of what a download is. It's sort of something that interacts inside the mind instead of, somebody talking to you outside the mind. So, and something that has an extraordinary speed of intelligence, an instantaneous speed of intelligence. And another thing is feeling that one's spirit is being pulled out of one's body, upwards, downwards, sidewards, the feeling that the body is being rotated. So these, we talk about these senses, like we have the sense of eyesight, smell, taste, hearing, touch, but it's not so much discussed, or we don't have the same language for the sense of movement and how one's body feels, moving. Maybe even things like depression, your body is being pulled downward. Elation, your body moves up, but more intense experiences of that are really extraordinary that some people might find some familiarity with what I'm saying. Another thing is a unity state, the feeling that one's identity has merged with the environment, a sense of love and service to all, remorse for all and any harm done, akin to the loss of self in a near-death experience. So that unity state, that's another thing that often comes with these encounters. And then screen memories, the feeling that one has memories that are unnatural, that may not be actual lived memories, but are gestalt or complete memories with visuals, sight, sound, and smell. And this is, one perspective put forth by Dr. Joseph Birx, who describes that he calls it a theater of the mind, where these things are, they may be mental implants and such.
All very interesting. I know there's a lot of people talking about the relationship between consciousness and everything that's going on as when it comes to the UFOs as well. And your work with the Bigelow Institute is kind of fascinating. I don't know if you want to talk on that. We're going to be taking calls in about 5 minutes from now.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I basically edited a paper by a fellow named Matti Pitkainen, and Matti is a physicist. He has a degree from I think it's the University of Helsinki in Finland, and he's a dissident scientist in that he's gone away from some of the established physicists and developed his own ideas. And so there was a prize that Mr. Bigelow put forth, an essay contest, and the essay, I think the title was something like, "Is there evidence for the continuation of consciousness after death?" And good old Matti, he, I have to laugh because the guy's a genius of a man. Anyway, he has an interesting response to that question. He has some science, mathematics, physics to back up his theories. I had the privilege of working with him and editing his paper in around November. Mr. Bigelow and his group will adjudicate these essays, and knock on wood, Maddie will win, but whether he does or doesn't, I believe the man deserves a Nobel Prize. He's a genius.
Interesting. So I'm going to pull up now for anybody that would like to call. Here's the phone number. If you're over on Facebook or KGRA Radio or YouTube watching live right now, that number is 855-472-5483. Bill is standing by to take your call. So we have several lines anyone can call in to ask a question along any of the lines that we discussed tonight, or any actually new topics. You know, last time I did a call-in show, it seemed pretty successful, and I'm thinking about doing another one for all the listeners. It was a lot of great participation. I learned a lot of new UFO and very interesting, encounters that happened. It was really good to hear from the listeners. So I'm going to plan to do that. I believe the first, I'll have to take a look, because I'm going to be out at the International UFO Congress in September. Just to run that recap real quickly, I'm going to take a look at my schedule, and so when it comes to the first, let's see, that's a Tuesday on the 31st of August. That's already booked. So the following week, it looks like the call-in show, after all, is not going to be until the 21st in September. I was hoping it would be earlier than that, but we're booked right up until that time. But anyway, the lines are open. Love to hear from you if you'd like to call in. Again, that number is 855-472-5483. And Bill is standing by. And if you're too shy to call, but you'd like to get a question in there, please put your questions in caps. If you're in chat over at Facebook or on YouTube, please ask away. So I think, it's an interesting conversation. So just to touch a little bit more on going back to the dimensional discussion, you were saying that there is a possibility. Let me just try to, or maybe you should kind of put it in a nutshell of how the travel would work. I understand we did the illustrations on the technology of this, but
here, I got a little thing. I should have showed this earlier. Imagine this ball is a photon, and it's traveling from a little chip of silicon that's bounced off a distant planet, and it's going through space, getting through space. This is a photon, and it hits our probe, bink, and then it gets absorbed inside the probe. And so, this photon is inside the probe. Let me turn it around for you. If I do this the other way, things are backwards. And so then we amplify, we multiply that photon. And so the ship becomes, how do I do that? It's the other way. It's the other way. Which way is it now? Is that forward? Okay. So the ship takes on the properties of a giant electron, okay? And then extended out the front of that ship is something that takes on the properties of a giant positron. And we say it's a process of macroscopic action. The things that happen in the quantum world, they're pretty amazing. And, if we take those things that happen in the quantum world and we make them at the macro level, that's as big as human beings. So this positron, it's kind of big, I hear that I think Michael said that the probe that they saw apparently was about 15 feet or so, like 6 feet high and 12 feet across. I'm not sure exactly. But So an electron, we have an electron here that's I keep spinning that. An electron that's the size of a probe, a 12-foot object, you know. So and then so when we have this electron and positron, and then let's see if I have it here. Then we have another electron and positron. This is from this is from the original photon, and then there's a kind of a swapping of things where this electron is going to match that positron that originally came from the star, you know, the distant thing, and then the other one, where's it? You know, the other positron goes into another dimension, or you know, something like that. But it's a swapping of positions, and it's not a rocket paradigm. You know, this is quantum properties here.
And so let me just ask you, with this whole theory, is it a low energy or a high energy yield to get something like this to propagate?
Right. So, you know, the short answer is there was some idea that they would use something like the nuclear power of, you know, like a nuclear submarine. And I forget the figures right now, but you know, submarines, you know, some of the military submarines are powered by nuclear power plants. So the idea was to get, you know, maybe a couple or so of these nuclear generators, you know, inside the probe. So that's the problem, you know, is there size to do that? Some, you know, some to work on. But there's also this thing of like, you may not need such enormous amounts of power because you've got something spinning. You know, what does a tornado do? You know, I mean, a tornado is incredibly destructive power because it's spinning, you know, and then you know, it has a strong magnetic charge to it. There's a lot going on in this thing, and so if you have multiple, you know, forces focusing on a point at, you know, high speed, you may not need such enormous amounts of power. It's a facile attack, like, oh, you know, you don't have enough power to do it. Hey, they're not musicians. That, you know, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I can't fully defend this to every physicist in the world, but this is along the lines of the thinking.
Wow, interesting. Well, I think I have actually a friend on the line from Michigan, Phil. Is that you, Phil, from Michigan, the Phil I know?
That's the Phil you know, home of the swamp gas.
How you doing, Phil? Welcome to the show. You have a question or a comment tonight?
I have a comment, and it's about the Mick West being. I'm sorry. There's lots of feedback going on here.
All right. I'm wondering if that's happening. Maybe you should hang up and Bill just call right back, and Bill will bring you in, and we'll try it again. So go ahead. We'll wait to hear back from you. We have another caller, but Bill, let's get Phil back on again. So we'll just wait for that.
I'll say it again. Martin, you know, our archivists of the future are going to be really grateful that you recorded, you know, the different perspectives at this time period, because, you know, I'm an archivist myself. I love, you know, our archival work, and it's great to get these opinions. They're not going to last, in my opinion, but you know, get them down. Why not?
Yeah. All right. Well, Phil, why don't you try it now? He's back.
Okay. Yeah, there's no feedback now. Yeah, my comment was Mick West gets a lot of airtime. I hear him everywhere, and he has no credentials to do what he's doing. He's a bloody video game programmer, and yet he's treated like some kind of god. And I just kind of wonder why he gets so much deference when he's actually a member of an organization called the CSI, and it used to be called PsyCop, and he's a fellow with them. And if anybody's followed their career, they make a habit of belittling everybody who doesn't believe what they do. So my suggestion is, I think people in the UFO community should start becoming aggressive at people like Mick West and Tyson and that other yo-yo that you were talking about that did that article. Anyway, I've done venting. I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, you know, I feel, Phil, thank you for that. And I feel like it seems like every time in ufology, every moment in ufology has that type of person. You know, there's Michael Shermer. You know, Michael I had on the show. Actually, I thought he was kind of a gentleman. He was respectful and all that. But there are those people like Phil Klass from, you know, way back that are quite arrogant. And I do agree there's a difference between skepticism and debunking. And also you make a good point where, you know, why is West everywhere when Mick West everywhere on all these programs? We're talking, you know, news programs and everything as the go-to expert. I think he's out there because he's a squeaky axle. He's really out there blasting away, and I don't know any other reason.
Perspective on that. I believe he's being put in that position by the organization CSI. They're a very powerful group.
Okay.
Group, and they're using him. You know, he never mentions this. He never mentions that he's a member of CSI, but he's a CSI fellow. He's not just an ordinary believer in the mission of CSI. He's one of them.
Interesting.
That's a skeptics group, the Skeptical Inquirer. Is that those fellows? Or?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I pick up their magazine once in a while. I look at it, you know, and you know, it just keeps us on our toes. You know, keeps our pencils sharp and all, you know. But certainly, I feel very differently, and we need to be respectful. But I think we also need to look at people who are really forward thinking and encourage them and give them strength as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my perspective on CSI is they're very dishonest and they're not very nice people. And you just I've experienced them for the last 40 years or so, however long they've been in existence. And they're just a nasty bunch of scientists that don't like anything that's beyond what they believe in. Anyway, I've taken up enough time. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you, Phil. And by the way, Phil is a scientist. So thanks for the call, Phil.
Yeah.
All right. You bet. All right.
Yeah.
Take care.
There are people doing extraordinary things. And so, you know, people can have whatever beliefs they want, but
yeah, just like Alan Bean said in the clip earlier, you know, it doesn't do any harm if the people want to think that nobody landed on the moon. It doesn't hurt anyone, as according to him. There are situations where that type of stubbornness can hurt, but in this particular case, I just think it, you know, can set us back. I don't know how much, you know, you'd consider that hurting anyone, but we have Chris on from Houston, Texas. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi. I'm calling about the probe itself. I tuned in late, and first thing I saw was the image of the three colors, and I got excited because I saw something like that in 1959 when I was 9 years old, and I've never had an explanation for it in all those years. I've read occasionally accounts from some other person who had seen something like it. The one I saw, it looked like it was a few hundred feet in the air, and it looked like it was slightly bigger, maybe the size of a helicopter, but it really hard to tell, and made no noise. And it came I was with a friend out in a field, and it came toward us, but then it turned and it landed behind trees in an area where over the years, there's been other activity. And so my question is, if you're on the ground, like this gentleman was, your contact person, Mr. Miller, I think, if you saw that in the sky, it's already done its its version of getting from there to here. It's slowed down and it's in the atmosphere, right? Or is it just an image that I was seeing?
No, I mean, it's, the term slowed down is something that, these things, they just stop instantly. And, there's a reason that the probe has red, green, and blue colors, because red, green, and blue, when put together additively, make white. And so when you have these different wavelengths, the red, blue, and green wavelength, and you put them together into white light, you have many different wavelengths. And so that was part of the colors. And then the shape of the thing, the teardrop shape, was your sighting teardrop shape, or was it?
I couldn't see anything but the three colors. I couldn't see any structure at all behind it. Just a round shape with the three parts in the sky coming toward me, but not like approaching me, but pretty, like I said, it looked like it was a couple hundred feet up maybe. And then it turned and went down behind trees where there's a creek.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? You're validating it. It's wonderful. I mean, it's very exciting to hear you say this. It's,
it's trying to see all this material.
Yeah, I mean, you're validating me. I'm validating you here. That's pretty incredible.
So the other question is, assuming that it's slowed down, I understand that part now, but was I in any danger? Was there like some threat from that?
I think I can say that Mr. Miller's experience, the object went down below trees as well. So that there's sort of a parallel of phrases there. It's kind of interesting.
Wow, I missed that part.
Yeah, you said that, and I might not have mentioned it before, but Mr. Miller has said that as well. But what has happened to you? You've lived, it seems, many years since you were 9 years old, and and you're still going, and maybe you've gotten some.
No extraterrestrial has ever hurt me. Plenty of humans have.
Yeah. So you're an open-minded fellow. That's the important point. And and you saw something extraordinary, and now I'm saying that somebody else has had that same experience. So
I love this explanation. I don't know if it's your physicist friends may say it's not completely on point, but it's very fascinating.
Chris, let me ask you something. Did this happen to you in the same area in Texas and Houston?
Yes. And I've told it before. I've had other experiences, but in Houston.
Yeah, and about how long ago was that?
The other experiences or this one?
No, this one in particular.
Well, 1959. So I was 9 years old.
I see.
And I'm 71 now, and I might have been, I might have been 10 to 10. I think I was 9. And it was a part of Houston where I grew up, and I had other odd experiences on that creek. It's like a hotbed of activity over there on that particular creek, south of Houston, a creek that happens to empty directly into Clear Lake, which is where NASA is. And of course, that's led me to imagine some things. But
yeah, I want to validate your experience again and say that many people are saying that unusual things can sometimes happen in unique places on Earth. I don't fully understand. I don't understand that at all. But I have heard other people say that, knowledgeable people say that. And I want to show you another picture here. While I'm at it. When you get a magnet, a bar magnet, and you put the iron filings down, and you see that ovoid shape. Well, looky here, are like oval, and this is quite intentional, fits in to that ovoid shape where there's a North Pole and a South Pole, and the field lines take on that shape, if you can see. And then the tail has this kind of corona as well. You put down a magnet, you're going to see that thing. So this is not a rocket ship,
Right. Oh, it almost seems like an electronic or a quantum version of a Musk tunnel through the underground. You're creating a vacuum, a sort of a what's it called, a quantum vacuum, pulling from you're pushing your presence in front of you and then meeting up with it.
Yes. Also, just to go back to anecdotes, there's this fellow, I can't remember the author name, Sir something, Chichester or something. He's the guy who wrote Lonely Sky and the Sea. There's a fellow, he sailed the Atlantic by himself, and then he saw something in the sky that he said was, I believe he said it was teardrop shaped and red, green, and blue. So that's another person who, he saw an object in the sky that, was not an airplane. And this is way back, I don't know what, the 40s or whatever, 30s or something. I
may have read that account.
Yeah. Sir, what's his name? Lonely Sky and the Sea. He maybe it's the 50s, but he's a great writer too.
Chris, thank you so much for the call.
Oh, thank you so much again.
All right.
Yeah.
Great work.
Good to talk to you. So the lines are open, wide open right now. Again, that number is 855-472-5483. Earlier on in chat, we had a question that came up that I meant to post, and that person wanted to know what your thoughts were on the unidentified objects that people claim to see that are, triangle shaped, very large. Do you think that? I think the opinion was, are you looking at this as a secret military or any parts of the secret military, or could something like this evolve without, someone using that technology that you're talking about?
Well, the interesting thing is, that historically they talk about the TR-3B. It was some alleged military craft that was triangular. And then there were reports in the Belgium Air Force reports and the Belgian citizen reports of the UFO flap in the 80s of triangular shaped objects. And then the significant one, I think, is the reportage on the Phoenix Lights, where it was either a boomerang shaped or triangular shaped object. And I was very much an activist in the UFO community at the time of the Phoenix Lights. And again, it was a very exciting time. And then we were, concerned by the remarks of Fife Symington at the time, when he mocked it by dressing in a costume of an alien. But, as we all know, Fife Symington has turned around and said he could not explain what he saw. So, and he was a knowledgeable pilot. So, again, it's a mystery. We don't know. And again, I support advocacy to the people in a representative government should know what's going on.
Right. So we have, we could take one more call if someone else would like to call in. Other than that, we have about 4 minutes left to the show only. So if you'd like to call, you better call in quick if you would. I'm going to be taking that number down. So so that's interesting that you were really involved in the UFO world, or really paying attention back during the Phoenix Lights. That it's unfortunate that a lot of what people see when they're looking are not the Phoenix Lights. A lot of film was taken of the flares, unfortunately, there's supposedly only one real good video of what people were seeing, and the rest is the flares, from what I understand. But that was an incredible sighting. Some people reported, I had Peter Davenport on this show at one point, and he was saying that by the judgment of some accounts, that craft could have been up to 8 miles wide, which is or a minimum at a few miles or something. And to me, when the skeptics are saying, "Oh, that's something military that we developed," I don't foresee that. I can't imagine that we could have something that large that we could house and keep secret all the way back to 1997. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And one more comment I'd like to make. I don't have it here. I can't put it up. I did put it on our Facebook page. But there is a pilot, a military pilot, talking about what sounds like a tic-tac shaped object that he saw in 1931. It's an interview from 1931. He talks about a pearl. It's like a pearl with a tail. And then it disappeared and came back. Very fascinating. But one of the questions I have for you is in this theory that you're talking about, this travel theory, a lot of people say that they see a UFO and then it blinks out. Would this also be the case of this travel that you're talking about, because it's another dimension? It's using another dimension?
Yeah, right on the point. This is not standard travel. This is like one place, going into another dimension and being in another place. It's a different way of thinking. And, something blinks out, it's blinking to another place somewhere else. It's blinking on. It's a different way of thinking. It's a paradigm shift. So that's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. All fascinating. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Now, when we were talking off air, did you say you might write another book?
Yeah. Like, I'm gathering notes now toward making another book with Mr. Miller. He has, some responses to the critiques that we've received, and he has some new ideas. It's just at the beginning stages. But again, I want to just say, like, my first book was this one, and it's kind of a thinner book, and had kind of fewer details on it. This second book is about 290 pages, and so there are developments of things, and I just want to emphasize that, just like making a light bulb or making an electric car, it starts out kind of rough and it gets more refined.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thanks. Whoops, we had a caller we missed. That's too bad. Kevin, so sorry, Kevin, we missed you. Actually, Bill, let me know right now if he's still on the line. We can pull him in if you do have the extra time. Oh, he's gone. All right. Well, that's too bad. Sorry, Kevin. Hope you call back next time. Thank you so much for being on the show this evening. It was a very interesting talk. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. You're very kind, and I really appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to talk with you.
Excellent. All right. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, everyone. So next week we have Chris Spark on, and he's I believe he's an actor, but he also has a book that has to do with I think aliens in the human race or something like that. Or anyway, I can't really remember his book right now. I don't have it up here in front of me, but it's something that he usually doesn't write about. He's an interesting guy. What a background this guy has, and he'll be a fascinating guest. So you can look forward to that next week. Thank you, Bill, for taking the calls and doing a great job at KGRA Radio as usual. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky, and we'll see you next week.